In some regions of Mexico, religious freedom is far from guaranteed. For minority Christian groups like Seventh-day Adventists and evangelicals, refusing to join local Catholic festivals, central to community life, brings real danger. Their conscientious objection is seen as a threat to tradition, not just a difference in belief. Local leaders or caciques enforce participation, claiming it's essential for unity. Those who refuse face fines, threats, and loss of basic services like water and electricity. In states like Chiapas and Oaxaca, indigenous laws called usos y costumbres often override national protections for religious freedom. These laws, meant to preserve culture, are sometimes twisted to enforce religious conformity. Families who stand apart are labeled traitors, cut off from resources, and sometimes even expelled from their homes. Children may be barred from school, and entire families can be plunged into poverty and isolation. The consequences are severe: arrests, beatings, and forced displacement. Their only crime is following their conscience and worshiping differently. This is the hidden reality for many Christians in modern Mexico. Their struggle is not just about faith, but about the right to live in peace. The pressure to conform is relentless, and the cost of resistance is heartbreakingly high. In Pinar, Selenas, Chiapas, religious conflict erupted into violence in January 2026. 9 Adventist men were detained and beaten for refusing to fund Catholic festivals. Their faith forbade participation, but local leaders saw this as rebellion. Threats of hanging or burning were used to force compliance. Their families watched in fear as their loved ones were punished for their beliefs. This was not an isolated event, but the climax of years of growing hostility. Denied services and living under constant threat, these families were left vulnerable and isolated. The men were released only after paying fines, but the fear and division remained. The expectation to join festivals is enforced with violence, not choice. In Pinar, Selenas, religious freedom is a right that can be violently stripped away. The scars of this conflict run deep, leaving the community fractured. For these families, faith comes at a steep and painful price. Usos y costumbres, local customary laws, are meant to protect indigenous culture in Mexico, but in practice, they can be used to force religious conformity. Catholic festivals are seen as civic duties, not just religious events. Refusing to participate is viewed as an attack on community identity. Local leaders use these laws to justify punishing dissenters, cutting off water, electricity, or even expelling families. The Mexican Constitution guarantees religious freedom, but in these regions, local law often prevails. State authorities rarely intervene, fearing backlash for infringing on indigenous autonomy. For minority Christians, this means little protection and nowhere to turn. Tradition, meant to unite, becomes a tool for exclusion and suffering. For Adventist and evangelical families, persecution is a daily reality. Denial of water and electricity is common, forcing families to fetch water from unsafe sources and live in darkness. Children are sometimes barred from school, robbing them of education and hope. The community's message is clear: conform or suffer. Social isolation and verbal abuse are constant. Former friends become strangers, and fear becomes a daily companion. The threat of violence or expulsion hangs over every day, yet many families refuse to abandon their faith, drawing strength from each other. Their resilience is remarkable, but the cost is immense. The struggle is not just for survival, but for dignity and the right to believe. These families endure hardship not for defiance, but for conscience. Their children grow up in the shadow of exclusion, yet some still hope for acceptance. In these villages, faith is both a source of strength and a reason for suffering. In Oaxaca, Pastor Mariano Velázquez's story echoes the same pattern of persecution. As an evangelical leader, his refusal to conform to local religious practices led to his illegal detention. He was pressured to renounce his faith and abandon his ministry. When he refused, he and his family were expelled from their home and community. They lost everything: home, belongings, and their congregation. This expulsion sent a chilling message: dissent will not be tolerated. Pastor Velasquez's only crime was his faith and leadership. His story is one of many, showing how local laws are used to silence and uproot religious minorities. International human rights groups are sounding the alarm about religious persecution in Mexico. Organizations like Christian Solidarity Worldwide and Open Doors document abuses and support victims. They highlight the gap between Mexico's constitutional promises and the harsh reality in indigenous regions. Usos y costumbres laws are often cited as a root cause of conflict. These groups urge the Mexican government to protect religious minorities and hold local leaders accountable. Mexico's reputation for religious freedom is tarnished by these persistent abuses. Global attention is crucial for pressuring change and offering hope to the persecuted. Reports from these organizations share stories of loss, resilience, and unwavering faith. The world is watching, and the call for justice grows louder. For many, international support is a vital lifeline in their struggle for freedom. The persecution in Mexico echoes darker chapters of history, like the Inquisition. Forced religious conformity, whether by tribunal or village council, leads to suffering and injustice. The Bible's words about persecution offer comfort to those enduring hardship for their faith. For these families, Scripture is not just history, it's their lived experience. True harmony cannot be built on forced conformity, but on respect for differences. The events in Mexico remind us that the fight for religious freedom is ongoing. We must not ignore the suffering of these families. Raising our voices and urging action is the first step. The Mexican government must uphold its constitution and protect all citizens. We can support the persecuted with advocacy, prayer, and solidarity. Let us work for a world where no one must choose between their home and their beliefs.